In today's episode, we're looking at 6 cases where live broadcasts captured fatal incidents as they unfolded, from a vacation souvenir recorded 150 feet in the air to a festival goer who suddenly collapsed under strobe lights, captured live in the most shocking way possible. It was November 3rd, 2014, in downtown Phoenix. The morning rush hour unfolded under clear skies with minimal wind and excellent visibility. Bright morning sunlight and clear atmospheric conditions illuminated the busy 4-lane intersection with its heavy pedestrian and vehicle traffic. Rhonda Becker was 42 years old, a marketing coordinator who worked in a nearby office building. She had lived in the city for 6 years and regularly walked to work using established crosswalk routes, maintaining good physical health and following standard pedestrian safety practices. Her presence at the intersection involved her daily commute to work, crossing at the designated pedestrian crossing during the traffic signal cycle as part of her routine. Rhonda planned to cross the intersection using the marked crosswalk during the pedestrian signal cycle, which allowed roughly 30 seconds to cross before switching to a flashing countdown. Her preparation involved waiting at the corner with several other pedestrians for the signal change, following her established daily routine. The relevant risks included distracted drivers, red light violations, and heavy morning traffic volume creating dangerous conditions. Early warning signs included increased aggressive driving behavior due to rush hour congestion and several near-miss incidents at the same intersection during previous weeks. At the intersection's northeast corner, Rhonda waited with other pedestrians for the crossing signal, while a television news crew conducted a live traffic report from the southwest corner. At 8:17 a.m., the pedestrian signal activated, and Rhonda began crossing the street with the right-of-way, following standard pedestrian protocols. The morning rush hour was particularly heavy due to construction on a parallel street, diverting additional traffic. The television reporter explained the increased congestion to viewers while Rhonda checked her watch, running slightly behind schedule. Traffic moved slowly through the intersection as multiple vehicles approached from all directions during the peak commute period. Simultaneously, a pickup truck traveling southbound at approximately 35 miles per hour approached the intersection, with the driver later determined to be texting while driving, failing to notice the red traffic signal and continuing through the intersection without slowing. At 8:15 a.m., the vehicle struck Rhonda in the center of the crosswalk, propelling her approximately 15 feet forward onto the roadway. Rhonda sustained massive trauma to her head and torso from the collision, while the pickup truck continued for another 50 feet before the driver stopped briefly, then panicked and fled the scene at high speed. Witnesses immediately surrounded Rhonda while others pursued the fleeing vehicle. As the collision unfolded within the television crew's live traffic shot and the broadcast remained active, emergency medical services arrived at the intersection within 6 minutes of the collision, finding Rhonda unconscious and in critical condition. Paramedics performed advanced trauma care, including airway management and hemorrhage control, while preparing for immediate transport. But despite aggressive medical intervention, Rhonda was pronounced deceased en route to the trauma center approximately 15 minutes after the impact. The medical examiner determined the cause of death as multiple traumatic injuries, including severe head trauma, internal organ damage, and massive blood loss consistent with vehicular impact. Law enforcement located the fleeing driver 3 hours later using witness descriptions and traffic camera footage, with the driver arrested and charged with vehicular manslaughter and leaving the scene of a fatal accident. It was July 19th, 2018, in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina. Clear afternoon skies marked peak summer season at the Mountain Adventure Park, with bright sunlight providing excellent visibility across the forested canopy where zipline cables stretched between platforms at heights reaching 150 feet. Willa Porter was 29 years old, a marketing coordinator from Atlanta, visiting the area on vacation with friends. She had brought a small action camera to document her trip, and wanted to capture footage of the Zipline ride. She happened to be there while a local television crew was filming a live promotional segment for the park. The Zipline course featured 6 cables spanning distances between 200 and 800 feet. The final zip line stretched 800 feet across a valley at 150 feet above the forest floor. Riders reached speeds of 35 to 40 miles per hour and were required to brake manually by gripping the cable behind them with both gloved hands as they approached the landing platform. The cable's slight upward angle toward the platform was designed to slow riders naturally, but manual braking was still required to reduce speed from approximately 30 miles per hour to a safe landing speed. Willa planned to ride the final zip line while wearing a chest-mounted camera. Her preparation involved a standard safety briefing and 2 practice runs on shorter zip lines. The guide initially stated park policy prohibited camera equipment during rides, but after Willa signed an additional liability waiver and demonstrated proper hand positioning on 2 practice runs, the guide allowed her to proceed with the chest-mounted camera. At 3:16 p.m., a television crew was broadcasting live from the landing platform area, with their reporter discussing the park's safety features and popularity. Lance Dunlap, the station's camera operator, had positioned his camera to capture wide shots of the zipline attraction as backdrop for the segment. Willa prepared at the launch platform, wearing her chest-mounted camera. At 3:17 p.m., she launched from the platform and accelerated down the cable, reaching speeds estimated at 35 to 40 miles per hour, while the live broadcast continued below. Approximately 600 feet into the ride, Willa's body position shifted as she adjusted to look down at the forest below. The movement caused her harness to rotate slightly as she reached toward her chest to stabilize the camera, removing her right hand from the safety strap. At 200 feet from the platform, Willa needed to begin braking by gripping the cable behind her with both gloved hands. Her right hand was still near her chest camera. The guide at the landing platform saw her position and began shouting instructions to grab the cable. Willa reached back with her right hand but could not achieve proper grip due to her rotated position and forward momentum. Willa's speed remained at approximately 30 miles per hour as she approached the platform. At 3:18:45 p.m., she struck the landing platform's wooden edge barrier at torso level at high speed. The television camera, positioned to capture the zip line in the background of the promotional segment, recorded the collision live on air before the station immediately cut away. The impact caused severe trauma to her torso, and she became unresponsive while remaining suspended in the harness attached to the cable. The impact triggered the trolley's emergency brake system, but her momentum had already carried her past the platform, leaving her suspended 15 feet beyond. The guide reached Willa's position within 90 seconds. She was unresponsive and showed no signs of breathing. Park medical staff arrived within 3 minutes. Emergency services reached the platform 18 minutes after the impact. Despite aggressive medical intervention, Willa could not be revived and was pronounced deceased at 3:52 p.m., approximately 34 minutes after impact. An autopsy determined the cause of death was massive blunt force trauma to the chest and abdomen, with cardiac rupture and liver laceration causing death within seconds. The investigation found all equipment functioned properly. Investigators determined the impact occurred after Willa was unable to establish a stable braking position as her body rotated during the approach. With the chest-mounted camera cited as a contributing distraction, the death was ruled accidental, with state officials prohibiting liability waiver exceptions that compromise standard safety procedures. It was September 8, 2015, in northern Georgia. The morning brought partly cloudy skies with comfortable conditions and light humidity during peak service hours. Natural lighting from stained glass windows provided normal visibility inside the traditional brick church building with wooden pews and standard ventilation systems. Norbert Finch was 71 years old, a retired postal worker who had attended the same church for over 20 years. He maintained regular attendance at weekly services and participated in various church activities throughout his retirement. Norbert had experienced mild chest discomfort earlier that week, but dismissed it as indigestion. Witnesses later stated that he appeared normal during the early portion of the service. His presence there involved his normal Sunday worship routine with his wife of 40 years. Norbert planned to attend the complete morning service, which typically lasted 90 minutes, including hymns, sermon, and closing prayers. His preparation involved his usual Sunday morning routine, without any unusual activities or stressors that might indicate impending medical issues. The relevant risks included his advanced age and potential undiagnosed cardiovascular conditions common in his demographic. The chest discomfort from earlier in the week represented the only warning sign, though Norbert showed no outward signs of distress during the service. The incident occurred in the fourth pew, from the front, on the right side of the main sanctuary. Norbert sat in his customary location next to his wife, following along with the service program. At 11:32 a.m., during the pastor's sermon about community service, Norbert began showing signs of physical distress that witnesses observed as clutching his chest and breathing heavily. Within 30 seconds, Norbert's condition deteriorated rapidly as his face became pale and he began sweating profusely despite the comfortable temperature. At 11:33 a.m., Norbert collapsed sideways in the pew, his body going limp and unresponsive, while several congregation members immediately recognized the medical emergency. The camera remained fixed at the front of the sanctuary, with no operator present to adjust framing as the situation unfolded. Church members with medical training responded within 2 minutes, attempting cardiopulmonary resuscitation, while others contacted emergency services. Several congregation members with medical training moved into position while others stood nearby, partially obscuring the camera's view of the pew. The pastor's voice remained audible over the church microphone system as movement spread through the sanctuary, while some attendees stepped into the aisles during the response. The sanctuary camera continued streaming the wide shot as movement in the aisle partially blocked the view, while the broadcast audio picked up low voices and footsteps. Norbert remained unconscious and unresponsive throughout the resuscitation attempts, with his breathing becoming irregular before stopping completely at 11:38 a.m. The live feed showed Norbert leaning forward before he disappeared from full view as people stepped between him and the camera, leaving only partial visuals of the response. Emergency medical personnel arrived at the church 12 minutes after the initial emergency call, continuing advanced life support measures for an additional 20 minutes. Despite aggressive resuscitation efforts, including defibrillation and cardiac medications, Norbert could not be revived and was pronounced deceased at the scene at 12:05 p.m. The medical examiner's autopsy revealed Norbert had suffered a massive myocardial infarction caused by complete blockage of his left anterior descending coronary artery, with examination showing extensive underlying coronary artery disease that had gone largely undiagnosed. The death was ruled natural causes, with the sudden cardiac event being consistent with his age and underlying cardiovascular pathology. It was June 22nd, 2017, in eastern Tennessee. Clear evening skies and steady lighting conditions marked the county fair's peak hours as temporary carnival rides and attractions filled the level fairgrounds. Artificial lights illuminated the midway, providing clear visibility across the ride area. Deanna Wolf was 28 years old, a housewife visiting the fair with friends during a summer evening outing celebrating a friend's birthday. She had limited experience with carnival rides, but enjoyed occasional thrill-seeking activities and appeared healthy and physically fit with no known medical conditions or fears of heights. Her presence at the fair involved the group celebration, with plans to experience several attractions, including the prominent Ferris wheel. Deanna planned to ride several attractions, including the Ferris wheel, which stood 80 feet tall and offered panoramic views of the surrounding area. Her preparation involved purchasing ride tickets and waiting in line for approximately 15 minutes with her friends. The relevant risks included mechanical failures, common with traveling carnival equipment, and inadequate safety inspections of temporary installations. Early warning signs included unusual noises from the ride's motor system and visible wear on the older mechanical components of this 1980s-era traveling carnival ride, though these went unnoticed by most patrons. Near the top of the Ferris wheel's rotation, approximately 75 feet above ground level, Deanna sat inside a swing-style passenger car on the ride's eastern side, secured by a metal gate latch, while a local television crew filmed a live segment about the fair's opening night activities below. At 7:45 p.m., the wheel slowed as part of its normal loading cycle, holding several passenger cars elevated while riders waited for the next rotation. Other passengers pointed and took photos of the fairgrounds below, while Deanna's friends waved from the ground. The television crew was interviewing families about their favorite attractions as children's laughter filled the air. The ride operator chatted with waiting patrons about safety features, unaware of the developing wear inside the aging gate latch assembly above. At 7:46 p.m., the passenger car's gate latch failed suddenly when a worn secondary locking pin gave way under normal movement, allowing the door to swing open as the car shifted slightly during rotation. Deanna immediately began sliding forward as the passenger car continued moving, her upper body already angled forward when the gate opened. She lost her grip on the car's side rail within seconds and fell from the 75-foot height. Deanna fell approximately 75 feet, impacting the concrete walkway below within seconds in view of the television news crew positioned near the ride's base. Witnesses described hearing the metal snap, followed by screams from other passengers who observed the fall. The entire sequence from restraint failure to ground impact lasted less than 10 seconds, with the live camera capturing Deanna's fall and the immediate aftermath. Emergency responders arrived at the fairgrounds within 8 minutes of the accident, finding Deanna unconscious and critically injured on the concrete surface. Paramedics immediately began advanced life support measures while preparing for emergency transport to the regional trauma center. But despite aggressive medical intervention, Deanna succumbed to her injuries during transport approximately 25 minutes after the fall. The medical examiner determined the cause of death as massive traumatic injuries consistent with high-altitude impact, including severe head trauma, multiple bone fractures, and extensive internal bleeding. The subsequent investigation revealed the passenger car's gate latch failed due to a worn safety pin that should have been replaced during routine maintenance, with state safety officials immediately shutting down the ride and launching a comprehensive review of all carnival equipment. It was August 12, 2016, in downtown Seattle. Overcast skies dominated the afternoon with light drizzle affecting the planned demonstration. The public plaza, surrounded by buildings and commercial structures, experienced damp conditions from intermittent light rain, leaving surfaces slick across the plaza. Dusty Malone was 25 years old, a college student studying environmental science who had participated in several peaceful protests over the past 2 years, focusing on environmental and social justice issues. He possessed basic climbing experience from recreational rock climbing, but had no professional training with electrical systems or utility infrastructure. His presence at the demonstration involved participating in a protest against proposed industrial development in protected wilderness areas. Dusty planned to hang a large banner from a utility pole to increase visibility for the protest message, bringing climbing rope and a handmade banner measuring 8 feet by 4 feet. His preparation involved basic climbing equipment but lacked proper safety assessment of the electrical hazards present. The relevant risks included electrical hazards from overhead power lines and height dangers of climbing utility infrastructure, with early warning signs including wet conditions from light rain increasing electrical conductivity and proximity of high-voltage transmission lines running parallel to the street. The incident occurred at a utility pole located on the plaza's eastern edge, approximately 30 feet from the main protest gathering. Dusty began climbing the wooden pole at 2:45 p.m., using his rope and basic climbing techniques to ascend toward the 25-foot level, while a news crew filmed the demonstration live for evening broadcast, positioned with a clear view of the entire plaza. The demonstration had drawn approximately 200 participants, with speakers addressing the crowd through portable sound systems. Dusty's climbing attempt drew attention from fellow protesters, with some calling out height warnings, while others encouraged his effort. The wet conditions made the wooden pole slippery, requiring him to grip tighter as several protesters filmed his ascent with their phones. At 2:47 p.m., Dusty reached the upper portion of the pole and began securing his banner to the crossbeam structure. But while adjusting the banner's position, he moved closer to an energized 7,200-volt distribution line running above the crossbeam, bringing his hand into contact with the conductor during the wet conditions. The electrical contact lasted less than 1 second before the shock caused him to lose control and fall from the pole. He fell 25 feet, striking the concrete plaza surface below as the news camera's wide shot continued recording the demonstration during the fall. Emergency responders arrived at the plaza within 7 minutes of the incident, finding Dusty unconscious and in cardiac arrest. Paramedics immediately began advanced life support measures, including defibrillation and cardiac medications, while coordinating emergency transport. But despite continuous resuscitation efforts, Dusty could not be revived and was pronounced deceased at the regional medical center 45 minutes after the electrical contact. The medical examiner determined the cause of death as cardiac arrest caused by high-voltage electrical shock, with contributing factors including severe burns and traumatic injuries from the subsequent fall. The investigation determined Dusty had entered the minimum clearance zone of an energized distribution line while attempting to secure the banner. Officials ruled the death accidental, citing unsafe proximity to electrical infrastructure during the climb. It was July 19, 2018, in Austin, Texas. The evening brought sweltering heat, with temperatures reaching 95 degrees Fahrenheit and oppressive humidity levels during the festival's peak performance hours. Visibility varied dramatically between bright stage lighting and darker crowd areas, with frequent strobe light effects from the performances creating intense lighting conditions within the crowd area. Jace Kellerman was 22 years old, a college senior studying business administration with no known medical history of neurological conditions. He had attended music festivals previously without incident and maintained good physical health, but had been at the festival for approximately 8 hours and awake for over 20 hours while consuming alcohol moderately. His presence at the festival involved celebrating summer break with friends at the 3-day music event, experiencing typical festival conditions, including heat and dehydration. Jace planned to watch the headlining performance on the main stage, which featured extensive lighting effects and high-volume sound systems. His preparation involved minimal food intake during the day and continued alcohol consumption in the heat, creating potentially dangerous conditions. The relevant risks included dehydration, heat exhaustion, sleep deprivation, and potential seizure triggers from strobe lighting in susceptible individuals. Early warning signs included Jace's increasing fatigue and mild confusion, which friends attributed to alcohol consumption and heat exposure rather than recognizing potential medical concerns. The incident occurred in the general admission area, approximately 100 feet from the main stage, where Jace stood with thousands of other festival attendees, while a television crew broadcast live coverage of the headlining performance for a music network. At 9:52 p.m., the performer began a song featuring intense strobe lighting effects synchronized with heavy bass frequencies that may have contributed to the episode. The crowd's energy peaked as the headlining act launched into their most popular song, with thousands dancing in unison. Jace and his friends were positioned in the dense general admission area, surrounded by festival goers who had waited hours for the performance. The combination of body heat, limited air circulation, and intense lighting created oppressive conditions that intensified the already stressful crowd conditions. Within 30 seconds of the strobe light sequence beginning, Jace began showing signs of neurological distress as witnesses observed him becoming disoriented and stumbling despite being stationary in the crowd. At 9:53 p.m., Jace suddenly collapsed to the ground and began experiencing uncontrolled full-body convulsions consistent with a generalized tonic-clonic seizure that continued for approximately 2 minutes before progressing into status epilepticus. Jace's body exhibited severe muscle contractions and loss of consciousness, while festival security and nearby attendees attempted to clear space and protect him from injury during the convulsions. The continuous seizure activity became life-threatening as it showed no signs of stopping naturally, with the live television broadcast capturing Jace's collapse and subsequent emergency response efforts as medical personnel pushed through the dense crowd. Festival medical staff reached Jace's location within 6 minutes of the initial collapse, finding him in continuous seizure activity and respiratory distress. Emergency medical technicians administered anti-seizure medications and established airway management while coordinating emergency transport through the crowded festival grounds. But despite aggressive medical intervention, including multiple anti-seizure drugs and advanced life support, Jace's seizure activity could not be controlled. Jace was transported to the regional medical center, where neurologists continued treatment for status epilepticus, but he remained unresponsive and in critical condition before being pronounced deceased after 18 hours due to complications from prolonged seizure activity and resulting brain damage. The medical examiner determined the cause of death as status epilepticus, with no underlying seizure disorder, likely associated with a combination of severe dehydration, sleep deprivation, alcohol consumption, heat stress, and intense strobe lighting exposure, with the case ruled natural death due to an unpredictable first-time seizure event. Thanks for watching. If you like these stories, click here.